The massive German shepherd lunged forward with a deafening bark. He landed squarely between the terrified woman in the wheelchair and the gang of cruel teenagers who were about to push her into the freezing lake. Sadie closed her eyes and braced for the worst. But the dog did not attack her. Instead, he stood his ground like a highly trained soldier. Right behind him came a furious Navy SEAL whose piercing blue eyes promised absolute destruction to anyone who dared to take another step. What brought this elite soldier and his loyal dog to this exact hidden corner of the park? The answer is more shocking than anyone could ever imagine. Before we dive in, let us know in the comments which country you are watching from, and if you love stories that melt your heart, please subscribe to support our channel. The early morning sun cast a warm golden glow over the quiet town of Oak Creek. Sadie sat near the edge of a small, sparkling lake in the center of the local public park. Sadie was a beautiful 25-year-old woman with long, wavy chestnut hair and bright hazel eyes. She possessed a kind heart and a remarkable talent for capturing the beauty of nature on canvas. She sat comfortably in a sleek black manual wheelchair. A devastating car accident had taken away the use of her legs when she was just a teenager. Despite the severe challenges she faced every single day, Sadie refused to let her circumstances destroy her positive spirit. She found immense joy in the simple things around her. The gentle rustling of leaves in the wind, the cheerful chirping of morning birds, and the vibrant colors of blooming spring flowers all gave her endless artistic inspiration. Her absolute favorite spot in the entire world was this hidden corner of the park. It was a secluded area shaded by massive ancient oak trees. The thick branches created a natural canopy that blocked out the loud noise of the busy city streets nearby. Sadie positioned her wheelchair on the flat paved path, set up her heavy wooden easel, and carefully organized her vast collection of oil paints. She took a deep breath of the fresh morning air and smiled softly. She picked up her favorite brush and began to mix a perfect shade of sky blue. Painting was her personal sanctuary. It allowed her to express the deep emotions she kept hidden inside. For a few peaceful hours every morning, she was not just the vulnerable woman in the wheelchair. She was a powerful creator of beautiful worlds. Sadie hummed a cheerful melody as she applied gentle strokes of paint to her canvas. She was working on a detailed portrait of the lake, trying to capture the exact way the bright sunlight danced on the rippling water. A few friendly squirrels darted across the green grass nearby, completely unafraid of her quiet presence. She tossed a few unsalted peanuts from her pocket onto the ground for them to enjoy. She deeply loved animals and often wished she had a loyal companion of her own. However, her small apartment and physical limitations made it difficult to properly care for a pet. Instead, she poured all her affection into the local wildlife that visited her during her long painting sessions. The peaceful atmosphere was exactly what her soul needed. The crisp morning air smelled of damp earth and blooming jasmine flowers. She felt completely relaxed and focused. The stressful outside world faded away completely, leaving only the blank canvas and her vivid imagination. She expertly blended a rich forest green for the tall trees reflecting on the water surface. Her hands moved with practiced grace and confident precision. She applied the thick paint with small, deliberate strokes, building realistic texture and depth on the canvas. Art was the one area of her life where she felt completely in control. She did not need anyone's help to create something magnificent. Her physical limitations simply vanished when she held a paintbrush. In her mind, she could easily climb the highest mountains she painted, or run freely through the endless fields of wildflowers she created. This hidden corner of the park was her kingdom, and for a few hours each day, she was its absolute ruler. Unfortunately, the profound peace of her hidden corner was about to be shattered. A loud burst of obnoxious laughter echoed through the quiet trees, making Sadie jump slightly in her seat and smear a thick line of green paint across the perfect blue sky on her canvas. She sighed in deep frustration and quickly reached for a cloth to wipe away the mistake. She recognized that harsh, cruel laughter immediately. It belonged to a group of local teenagers who frequently skipped school to loiter and cause trouble in the park. The undisputed leader of the group was a tall, heavily built boy named Kyle. Kyle had messy blonde hair, a constant nasty sneer on his face, and a cruel attitude toward anyone he perceived as weak or different. He was accompanied by 3 of his loyal friends, all of whom seemed to follow his every command without question. Sadie felt a familiar tight knot of anxiety form in her stomach. She tried to make herself look as small as possible in her chair, silently hoping they would just walk past her hidden spot and ignore her. She focused intently on her ruined canvas, pretending she did not hear their loud footsteps approaching on the gravel path. But her bright yellow sweater and the large wooden easel were impossible for them to miss. "Well, look what we have here," Kyle sneered loudly as he stepped off the main paved path and walked onto the soft grass toward Sadie. His friends trailed closely behind him, snickering maliciously like a pack of wild hyenas. "It is the neighborhood artist. What are you painting today, Wheels?" Sadie kept her eyes fixed firmly on her painting. She gripped her wooden brush tightly, trying desperately to keep her hand from visibly shaking. Her heart began to pound rapidly against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Please just leave me alone, Kyle," Sadie said softly. Her voice was polite, but carried a clear edge of nervous tension. "I am not bothering anyone at all." Kyle stepped much closer, casting a dark, intimidating shadow over her canvas. He smelled strongly of cheap cologne and stale cigarette smoke, a sharp and unpleasant contrast to the natural scents of the park. "You are bothering me," Kyle said with a mean, twisted smirk. "You are taking up valuable space in our park. This is our spot. We like to hang out right here, and looking at you is completely ruining our vibe." One of his friends, a shorter boy with a dark winter beanie, pulled low over his eyes, kicked the front wheel of Sadie's chair hard enough to make the entire frame jolt backward. "Yeah? Why do not you just roll away and paint somewhere else?" The boy laughed, his voice rough and incredibly unpleasant. Sadie swallowed hard, tasting bitter panic in the back of her throat. She knew from awful past experiences that arguing with them only made things much worse. They actively fed on fear and anger. She carefully placed her paintbrush down on her wooden palette, ignoring the way her fingers trembled violently, and began to pack up her art supplies. "Fine," Sadie said quietly, keeping her head down. "I will leave. Just let me gather my things." "Not so fast," Kyle said aggressively. He reached out with lightning speed and grabbed a thick leather-bound sketchbook that was resting on a small folding table next to Sadie. It was her absolute most prized possession in the world. The worn book contained years of her personal sketches, private thoughts, and complex ideas for future paintings. It was completely irreplaceable. "Let us see what kind of garbage you draw in here," Kyle demanded. Sadie gasped in pure, unfiltered panic. "Give that back," she yelled, her voice raising in genuine alarm and desperation. "That is private." She reached out desperately with both hands to grab the book back, but Kyle simply held it high above his head, far out of her physical reach. He laughed cruelly as she struggled to stretch upward from her seated position in the wheelchair. "What is the matter?" Kyle taunted her ruthlessly. "Why do not you just stand up and take it from me?" "Oh, wait. You cannot do that, can you?" His friends erupted into loud, cruel laughter that echoed across the lake. Sadie felt hot, stinging tears of humiliation and helplessness prick the corners of her eyes. Kyle began to toss the heavy sketchbook casually through the air to his friend in the beanie. The boy caught it clumsily and immediately tossed it to another teenager in a denim jacket. They were playing a sick, twisted game of keep-away, using her most precious personal item as a cheap toy. "Please," Sadie begged, her voice breaking with emotion. "Please stop it right now. You're going to ruin it." She grabbed the metal hand rims and pushed the wheels of her chair forward, trying frantically to chase after the boy currently holding her book. However, the thin front wheels got stuck deeply in a hidden patch of soft mud near the grass edge. She pushed hard, the metal rims digging painfully into her palms, but the heavy chair would not budge an inch. She was completely trapped in the mud. Her breathing became incredibly shallow and fast as panic set in. Kyle walked casually back over to her, a nasty, victorious grin spread across his face. He signaled for his friend to toss the leather book back to him. Kyle caught the sketchbook with one hand and held it precariously by one single delicate page, threatening to rip it right out of the tight binding. The terrible sound of the paper straining under the weight of the book made Sadie wince in actual physical pain. "Maybe I should just toss it into the lake," Kyle said, pointing a finger toward the deep water. "I bet your drawings would look much better wet. Maybe the fish need some art to look at today." Sadie felt completely trapped, vulnerable, and entirely overwhelmed. She was surrounded by cruel, heartless people who took immense joy in her suffering. The four teenagers closed in around her tightly, forming a solid circle that blocked any possible path of escape. Their mocking, ugly faces blurred together in her tear-filled vision. She felt a profound sense of isolation, a deep, crushing ache in her chest that had absolutely nothing to do with her physical condition. She closed her eyes tightly, refusing to let them see the tears that were now spilling freely down her pale cheeks. She braced herself for the sickening sound of tearing paper or the heavy splash of her book hitting the water. She silently wished for someone, anyone, to come to her rescue. The park was mostly empty at this early morning hour, and she knew in her heart it was highly unlikely that anyone would hear her cries for help. She squeezed her eyes shut, waiting for the inevitable destruction of her life's work, feeling entirely helpless in the face of their senseless cruelty, wondering if she would ever feel safe in her favorite place again. Wayne regulated his breathing as his heavy combat boots struck the paved path of Oak Creek Park in a steady, rhythmic cadence. He was a tall, heavily muscled man in his early 30s, possessing short, dark hair, sharp ice-blue eyes, and the disciplined, rigid posture of an active-duty Navy SEAL. He was currently stationed at the nearby military base and valued his rigorous morning routine above almost everything else. Running long distances through the quiet park helped clear his mind of the intense pressure and dark memories associated with his demanding job. Beside him jogged Apollo. Apollo was a magnificent German shepherd with a thick, glossy coat of black and tan fur, sharp, upright ears, and highly intelligent brown eyes. Apollo was not just a pet, but a highly trained military working dog and Wayne's closest companion. The large animal matched Wayne's steady pace perfectly, never pulling on the leash, his senses constantly alert to his surroundings. The morning air was crisp and cool, carrying the faint scent of pine needles and fresh water from the nearby lake. Wayne pushed himself to increase his speed, enjoying the familiar burn in his leg muscles. He found solace in the physical exertion, using the pain to ground himself in the present moment. Apollo trotted happily, his tongue hanging out slightly, completely in sync with his handler's movements. They moved together as a single unit, a testament to years of rigorous training and an unbreakable bond forged in highly stressful environments. As they approached the dense cluster of ancient oak trees near the edge of the lake, something shifted dramatically in the atmosphere. Apollo suddenly stopped running and dug his heavy paws deep into the dirt path. Wayne pulled gently on the leash, surprised by the sudden resistance, but the dog absolutely refused to move forward. Apollo lifted his large head high, sniffing the morning air with intense, focused concentration. The German shepherd's ears pinned back flat against his skull, and the thick hair along his spine stood straight up. A low, rumbling growl vibrated deep within the dog's broad chest, a sound that immediately put Wayne on high alert. Wayne recognized the dangerous change in his dog's behavior instantly. Apollo was sensing a real immediate threat nearby. Before Wayne could issue a verbal command to investigate, Apollo lunged forward with sudden explosive power. The thick leather leash slipped right out of Wayne's sweaty grip. Apollo sprinted off the paved path and tore across the wet grass like a guided missile, his powerful legs eating up the distance in a matter of seconds. Wayne did not hesitate for a fraction of a second. He immediately sprinted after his dog, his military instincts completely taking over his mind. He scanned the dense area ahead, his eyes searching for the source of Apollo's sudden aggressive reaction. As Wayne rounded a large cluster of thick bushes, a hidden, secluded corner of the park came into clear view, revealing a terrifying scene that made his blood boil with instant, uncontrollable anger. Sadie was completely trapped in her manual wheelchair, her thin front wheels buried deep in a patch of soft, wet mud near the edge of the grass. 4 intimidating teenage boys surrounded her in a tight, inescapable circle. The tallest boy, a teenager with messy blonde hair named Kyle, stood directly in front of her. Kyle was holding a thick leather-bound sketchbook dangerously close to the deep water of the lake, laughing cruelly as the helpless woman pleaded with him. The other boys were snickering maliciously, closing their circle tighter around the frightened artist. One of the teenagers, wearing a dark beanie, stepped forward aggressively and placed his hands firmly on the back handles of Sadie's wheelchair. He prepared to push her forcefully down the steep, muddy bank and straight into the cold water. Sadie squeezed her eyes shut in sheer panic, her hands gripping the armrests of her chair until her knuckles turned completely white. At that precise critical moment, Apollo arrived to intervene. The massive German shepherd leapt high through the air and landed squarely on the grass, directly between Sadie and the group of teenagers. Apollo bared his sharp white teeth and let out a vicious, deafening bark that echoed loudly across the surface of the lake. The sheer size and sudden aggression of the trained military dog caught the teenage boys completely off guard. The boy who was about to push Sadie's wheelchair stumbled backward in pure shock, tripped over his own feet, and fell flat on his back in the wet grass. Kyle immediately dropped his arm in terror, his arrogant, nasty smirk vanishing completely from his pale face. He took a frightened, shaky step away from the snarling animal, his eyes wide with genuine fear. Apollo stood his ground perfectly, planting his front paws firmly in the dirt, keeping his muscular body positioned exactly between the vulnerable woman and her attackers. The dog growled deeply and continuously, sending a clear, unmistakable warning that anyone taking another step closer would face severe consequences. Wayne broke through the tree line just a second later. He assessed the complex tactical situation in a fraction of a second. He saw the helpless woman crying in the trapped wheelchair, the terrified teenagers backing away, and his loyal dog holding the defensive line flawlessly. Wayne marched directly into the center of the group, his physical presence incredibly imposing and intimidating. He did not need to shout or raise his voice. His quiet, commanding tone carried the absolute, undeniable authority of a highly trained combat soldier. "Back away from her right now," Wayne ordered coldly, his piercing blue eyes locking directly onto Kyle. The teenage boys were visibly trembling in their shoes. Kyle tried desperately to maintain his tough, rebellious appearance, but his voice cracked noticeably when he finally spoke. "We were just messing around. It is no big deal, man." Wayne stepped much closer to Kyle, deliberately invading his personal space and staring down at him with immense pressure. "It looks like a very big deal to me. You have exactly 5 seconds to leave this park right now before I decide to show you what happens when you threaten innocent people." The group of boys did not wait for Wayne to start counting down the seconds. They scrambled clumsily to their feet, turned around in a complete panic, and sprinted away as fast as their legs could carry them, completely abandoning their cruel game. Wayne stood completely still and watched them disappear down the long path to ensure they were truly gone, and the immediate area was fully secure. Once he was satisfied that the threat had vanished, he took a slow, deep breath to calm his own surging adrenaline. He looked down at the soft ground near the edge of the lake. He saw the leather-bound sketchbook lying safely in the tall green grass, right where Kyle had dropped it in his frantic panic to escape. Wayne walked over calmly, picked up the precious book carefully, and gently brushed a few pieces of loose dirt off the intricate cover. He then turned his full attention to the fragile woman sitting in the wheelchair. She was still shaking visibly, her beautiful hazel eyes wide with lingering fear and confusion. Wayne immediately signaled Apollo to stand down with a subtle hand gesture. The large German Shepherd instantly stopped growling, his tense muscles relaxing, and he sat obediently in the grass right beside the wheelchair, though his intelligent eyes kept scanning the distant trees for any sign of returning danger. Wayne approached Sadie very slowly and deliberately, keeping his movements smooth and non-threatening, not wanting to frighten her any further after her traumatic ordeal. He stopped a respectful distance away and held out the leather sketchbook toward her with a gentle, reassuring expression on his face. He could see the fresh tear stains on her pale cheeks and the way she was struggling to regain control of her breathing. He silently promised himself that he would make sure she was safe. Wayne stood a few feet away from the muddy bank. He held the thick leather sketchbook in his right hand. The morning sun filtered through the oak trees and cast a gentle light on the scene. Sadie remained frozen in her wheelchair. Her knuckles were white from gripping the armrests. She looked at Wayne with wide hazel eyes. Wayne took a slow step forward. He wanted to ensure he did not frighten her any further. He extended his arm and offered the book to her. "Here is your book," Wayne said softly. "I believe this belongs to you." Sadie reached out with trembling fingers. She took the sketchbook and pulled it tightly against her chest as if it were a fragile child. A profound silence fell over the hidden corner of the park. Wayne cleared his throat softly. "I am very sorry for the sudden commotion," Wayne said. "I did not intend to scare you. Apollo is trained to respond to threats, and he acted on instinct when he heard you in distress." Sadie looked down at the large black and tan German Shepherd sitting obediently on the grass. A single tear escaped her eye and rolled down her pale cheek. Then another followed. Soon she was crying quietly. Wayne felt a sudden surge of guilt. He thought his imposing presence and the military dog had pushed her over the edge of panic. He took a step back to give her more space. "I apologize again," Wayne said. "I will leave you in peace now." Sadie shook her head quickly. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "Please do not go," Sadie said, her voice shaking slightly. "I am not crying because I am scared of you. I am crying because I am incredibly grateful. Those boys have harassed me for weeks. I felt completely helpless. Thank you for stepping in and saving my work." Wayne relaxed his posture slightly. He felt a deep sense of relief knowing he had not added to her trauma. He introduced himself properly. "My name is Wayne," he said. "I am an active-duty Navy SEAL stationed at the base nearby, and this is Apollo. He is a military working dog." Wayne warned Sadie not to make any sudden movements toward the animal. He explained that Apollo was highly trained for combat situations and was usually very suspicious of strangers. Wayne expected the dog to maintain his strict defensive posture. However, Apollo did something completely unexpected. The large German Shepherd stood up slowly. He wagged his tail with a gentle rhythm. Apollo walked right past Wayne and approached the wheelchair. Wayne tensed his muscles and prepared to issue a strict command to stop. But Apollo did not show any signs of aggression. The dog stopped right in front of Sadie. He looked up at her with soft brown eyes. Then Apollo rested his heavy head gently on her lap. Wayne stood completely still in pure shock. He had worked with Apollo for 3 years. He had never seen the dog show such immediate affection to a civilian. Sadie smiled through her tears. She slowly reached out a trembling hand. She looked at Wayne for permission. Wayne nodded slowly, still unable to comprehend his dog's unusual behavior. Sadie placed her hand on Apollo's head. She stroked his thick fur gently. Apollo closed his eyes and leaned into her touch. He let out a soft, contented sigh. "He is beautiful," Sadie whispered. "Thank you for sharing him with me." Sadie felt a profound sense of comfort from the dog's warmth. She looked at Wayne and introduced herself. She explained her passion for painting. She told him about the accident that had taken away the use of her legs. She explained how this secluded corner of the park was her only sanctuary. It was the only place where she felt truly free and in control of her life. Wayne listened intently to every word. He noticed the way her eyes lit up when she talked about her art. He also noticed the lingering fear behind her brave smile. He understood trauma perfectly. He had seen it in the eyes of his fellow soldiers. He recognized the deep emotional scars she carried. Wayne felt a strong connection to her. They were two broken people finding peace in a quiet park. He walked over to her easel and looked at the canvas. He saw the beautiful painting of the lake. He admired her incredible talent. "Your painting is magnificent," Wayne said. "You have a true gift." Sadie blushed slightly at the compliment. "Thank you," she replied, "but those boys ruined my concentration. I need to fix a mistake on the canvas now." Wayne watched her carefully. He saw the slight tremor in her hands. He knew she was still terrified. He knew those teenagers might come back tomorrow or the next day. The thought of them harassing her again made his blood boil. Wayne told her about his own struggles. He explained that returning from active duty was difficult. He said the quietness of civilian life was sometimes louder than a war zone. He found running helped him keep the dark thoughts at bay. Sadie listened with deep empathy. She understood the feeling of being trapped by things you could not control. She told Wayne that he was not alone in his struggles. They shared a quiet moment of mutual understanding. The bond between them began to form right there in the morning sunlight. It was a connection built on shared pain and unspoken resilience. Wayne realized that talking to Sadie made the heavy weight on his chest feel a little bit lighter. He looked down at Apollo, who was still enjoying the gentle scratches behind his ears. The dog had sensed her pure heart immediately. Wayne trusted his dog's instincts completely. If Apollo decided Sadie was safe, then Wayne knew she was someone special. Wayne made a firm decision right then and there. He looked Sadie directly in the eyes. His voice was calm but carried absolute authority. "You deserve to paint in peace," Wayne said firmly. "No one should ever make you feel unsafe in your own sanctuary. Things are going to change starting today." Sadie looked at him with confusion. "What do you mean?" "Apollo and I run 5 miles every single morning," Wayne explained. "I am going to change my running route immediately. We will be at this exact corner of the park every morning from now on. We will stand guard while you paint. We will ensure no one ever bothers you again." Sadie looked at him in pure astonishment. "You do not have to do that," Sadie said softly. "You have your own life and your own duties." Wayne shook his head firmly. "A soldier's primary duty is to protect those who cannot protect themselves," Wayne replied. "It would be an honor to guard your art studio." Apollo let out a soft bark of agreement, as if he understood the promise his handler had just made. Sadie felt a warm wave of emotion wash over her. For the first time in many years, she did not feel alone. She looked at the strong soldier and his loyal dog. She saw the absolute sincerity in his ice-blue eyes. She nodded slowly and accepted his offer. "Thank you," Sadie said, "from the bottom of my heart." Wayne smiled warmly. It was a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "I will see you tomorrow morning," Wayne said. He called Apollo back to his side. The dog reluctantly lifted his head from Sadie's lap and returned to Wayne. They turned and jogged away down the path. Sadie watched them go until they disappeared from sight. She looked back at her canvas and picked up her brush. Her hands were no longer shaking. She felt a profound sense of safety and a strange new flutter of hope in her chest. The days turned into weeks. The secluded corner of Oak Creek Park transformed from a place of fear into a sanctuary of deep connection. Every morning at exactly 7 o'clock, Wayne and Apollo arrived at the clearing under the ancient oak trees. Sadie was always there, waiting for them. Her wooden easel was set up, and her paints were neatly organized. The menacing teenagers never returned. Word had likely spread about the intimidating Navy SEAL and his fiercely protective military dog. True to his promise, Wayne stood guard while Sadie painted. He usually leaned against the thick trunk of a nearby tree. He maintained a watchful eye on the perimeter. Apollo always took his post directly at Sadie's feet. The large German shepherd rested his heavy head on the footrest of her wheelchair. The initial silence between them gradually gave way to comfortable conversation. At first, they spoke about simple things. They discussed the changing weather, the vibrant colors of the autumn leaves, and the various wildlife that visited the lake. Wayne started bringing 2 steaming cups of black coffee from a local cafe every morning. They would sip their drinks as the sun rose higher in the sky. However, as the mornings passed, their protective boundary naturally dissolved. They began to share the deeper, more hidden parts of their lives. Sadie found herself talking to Wayne with an ease she had not experienced in years. She felt incredibly safe in his imposing presence. One crisp Tuesday morning, the air was particularly still and quiet. Sadie put down her paintbrush and looked out across the glassy water. She decided to share the heaviest burden she carried. "It was raining very hard that night," Sadie began quietly. Her voice was steady, but held a profound sadness. Wayne stepped away from his tree and moved closer. He gave her his full attention. "My older brother was driving," she continued. "He was my only sibling and my best friend. We were coming home from my high school graduation. A drunk driver crossed the center line and hit us head-on." Sadie paused and took a deep, shaky breath. Apollo seemed to sense her sudden emotional distress. The loyal dog nudged her hand with his wet nose. She stroked his soft ears gratefully, finding comfort in his solid presence. "My brother died instantly," she whispered. "I woke up in the hospital 3 weeks later. The doctors told me my spine was severely damaged. They said I would never walk again. I lost my legs and my entire family in a single terrifying moment." Wayne felt a tight physical ache in his chest. He looked at the resilient woman in the wheelchair. He admired her incredible strength. He knelt down on the damp grass next to her, so they were exactly at eye level. "I am deeply sorry for your profound loss, Sadie," Wayne said softly. "You have endured an unimaginable tragedy. Yet you still managed to see the brilliant beauty in this world and capture it perfectly on canvas. You are the strongest person I have ever met." Sadie looked into his ice-blue eyes. She saw pure empathy and understanding. There was absolutely no pity in his gaze. People usually looked at her with obvious pity. Wayne looked at her with profound respect and admiration. "Thank you, Wayne," she replied. "But I am not always strong. Some days the memories are simply too heavy to carry. What about you? You carry heavy memories too. I can see it in your eyes when you think no one is looking." Wayne looked down at his rough, scarred hands. He had spent years burying his trauma under strict military discipline. He never talked about his classified missions with civilians. He firmly believed they could not possibly understand the harsh, violent realities of combat. But Sadie was completely different. She knew exactly what it meant to survive a living nightmare and wake up in a changed world. "You are right," Wayne admitted slowly. "My job requires me to operate in very dark places. I have seen the absolute worst of humanity. I have lost good men, brothers in arms. I carry their faces with me every single day." Wayne looked out at the peaceful lake, his mind flashing back to distant deserts and hostile environments. His voice dropped to a low, gravelly whisper. "Sometimes the noise of those violent memories is completely deafening. I come back home, and the civilian world feels strange and disconnected. I run every morning until my lungs burn just to quiet the relentless noise in my head." Sadie reached out and placed her small, paint-stained hand gently over his large, calloused one. "You do not have to carry it all by yourself," she said. "You spend your entire life protecting others. It is okay to let someone be there for you, too." Wayne turned his hand over and gently held her delicate fingers. The physical contact sent a warm surge of comfort through his entire body. He realized that this quiet corner of the park had become his sanctuary too. He eagerly looked forward to seeing her every single morning. Her gentle voice and kind spirit were the perfect antidote to his dark memories. Apollo rested his chin on their joined hands. He let out a soft sigh of ultimate contentment. The three of them sat there in the warm morning sunlight. They were a makeshift family of survivors, bound together by mutual understanding and unspoken affection. Strong, undeniable feelings were rapidly developing between them. Wayne found himself thinking about her bright, welcoming smile during his grueling training exercises at the military base. He worried about her safety when he was not around to protect her. Sadie found herself mixing the exact shade of his blue eyes into her vibrant landscapes. Her heart skipped a beat every time she heard his heavy combat boots approaching on the gravel path. She wanted to do something truly special to show him how much he and his dog meant to her. She wanted to give him a permanent piece of her heart. Later that week, Sadie secretly began a massive new project. When Wayne and Apollo were running their wider perimeter checks around the lake, she started sketching on a large canvas she kept hidden behind her regular setup. It was going to be her absolute masterpiece. She was painting a highly detailed, lifelike portrait of Wayne and Apollo standing proudly under the ancient oak trees. She poured all her growing love and deep gratitude into every single precise brush stroke. She wanted to perfectly capture his quiet strength, his noble character, and the fierce, protective loyalty of the German Shepherd. She planned to present it to him when it was completely finished. It would be a lasting symbol of the profound emotional connection they shared. She just needed a few more weeks to perfect the intricate details of his face. She had absolutely no idea that their peaceful daily routine was about to be violently interrupted by a shadow from the past. Kyle and his group of friends had not forgotten the humiliating defeat they suffered at the lake. For 2 entire weeks, they stayed hidden in the dense woods surrounding the public park. They watched the daily routine of the tall soldier and his massive German shepherd. Kyle was a bitter teenager who could not stand losing. His pride was severely damaged when he had to run away from the fierce dog and the intimidating Navy SEAL. He wanted revenge. He wanted to prove he was still the ruler of this local park. He meticulously studied Wayne's precise schedule. He noticed a crucial detail. Every single morning at exactly 8 o'clock, Wayne would walk to a small cafe located just outside the park gates to buy 2 cups of black coffee. The trip took exactly 10 minutes. During those 10 minutes, the disabled woman and the dog were completely alone. Kyle gathered his 3 friends and explained his malicious plan. They armed themselves with thick wooden sticks to keep the German Shepherd at bay. They waited patiently behind a large cluster of thick bushes, watching Wayne pat the dog on the head and walk away down the paved path. This was their perfect opportunity to strike back. Sadie sat in her black wheelchair, completely focused on her secret masterpiece. The large canvas was carefully propped up on her heavy wooden easel. She was adding fine details to Wayne's ice blue eyes, trying to perfectly capture his quiet strength. Apollo lay resting in the soft grass near her feet, his ears twitching occasionally at the sounds of the surrounding forest. The peaceful morning silence was suddenly broken by the harsh snapping of tree branches. Sadie turned her head and felt a cold wave of absolute terror wash over her entire body. Kyle and his 3 friends stepped out from the shadows of the ancient oak trees. They carried heavy wooden sticks and wore nasty, vengeful smirks on their faces. Apollo instantly jumped to his feet. The German Shepherd placed his muscular body between Sadie and the intruders. He bared his sharp teeth and let out a vicious, warning growl. Kyle did not back away this time. He swung his thick stick aggressively through the air, testing the dog's boundaries. "Keep that stupid mutt back," Kyle sneered, "or we will teach him a permanent lesson." Sadie grabbed the armrests of her wheelchair. Her heart hammered wildly against her ribs. She desperately wished Wayne was there. "Leave us alone, Kyle," Sadie said. Her voice trembled despite her best efforts to sound brave. "You are going to be in serious trouble if you do not walk away right now." Kyle laughed loudly. It was an ugly, cruel sound that echoed across the quiet lake. "Your military boyfriend is gone," Kyle said, taking a threatening step closer. "He is not here to save you today. And this time, We are not running away." One of his friends, the short boy in the dark beanie, stepped to the side, trying to flank the protective German shepherd. Apollo spun around, barking furiously, trying to keep all 4 attackers in his line of sight. The teenagers used their long wooden sticks to keep a safe distance from the dog's snapping jaws, effectively distracting the animal. Kyle used this momentary distraction to step right up to Sadie's easel. He looked at the large canvas. He saw the detailed, beautiful portrait of the soldier and the dog. A look of pure disgust crossed his face. "Is this him?" Kyle asked mockingly. "You're painting pictures of your hero? How pathetic." Before Sadie could react, Kyle lifted his heavy boot and kicked the wooden easel with all his strength. The easel crashed violently to the ground. The large canvas tumbled into the wet mud. Sadie screamed in pure horror as her secret masterpiece fell. Kyle stepped heavily onto the edge of the canvas. The thick fabric tore with a sickening ripping sound. A jagged tear ripped right through the painted image of Wayne's uniform. Sadie felt a physical pain in her chest, as if her own heart was being ripped apart. "You ruined it!" she cried out, tears streaming down her face. "Why are you doing this?" Kyle leaned down, his face twisted with malice. "Because this is our park," he spat. "And you do not belong here." Wayne was walking back from the cafe with 2 steaming cups of coffee in his hands. He heard the chaotic sounds of shouting and furious barking long before he reached the secluded clearing. His military instincts instantly flared to life. Adrenaline pumped through his veins like liquid fire. He dropped both coffee cups onto the gravel path and sprinted toward the lake. His heavy boots pounded against the ground with explosive speed. As he rounded the large cluster of bushes, he saw the terrifying scene unfolding. The teenagers were using long sticks to corner Apollo. Sadie was crying in her wheelchair. Her beautiful painting was lying in the mud, torn and ruined. Kyle was standing over her, shouting cruel insults. Wayne felt a terrifying, white-hot rage explode in his mind. He did not shout a warning. He did not hesitate. He simply attacked. He crossed the remaining distance in less than 3 seconds. Kyle heard the heavy footsteps at the very last moment. He turned his head just in time to see the furious Navy SEAL charging at him. Wayne hit Kyle like a freight train. He used his immense momentum to tackle the teenager directly to the ground. The thick wooden stick flew out of Kyle's hands and landed in the lake. Wayne pinned the boy down with overwhelming physical force, pressing his knee firmly into Kyle's chest. Kyle gasped for air, his eyes wide with absolute panic. The other 3 teenagers froze in pure shock. They dropped their wooden sticks immediately. Apollo stopped barking and stood proudly beside Sadie, securing her position. Wayne looked up at the remaining boys. His ice-blue eyes were filled with a dangerous, lethal promise. "Do not move a single muscle," Wayne commanded. His voice was dangerously calm, a stark contrast to the explosive violence he had just displayed. The teenagers stood completely still, absolutely terrified of the highly trained soldier. Wayne reached into his pocket with his free hand and pulled out his cell phone. He tossed it gently into Sadie's lap. "Call the police," Wayne told her, never taking his eyes off the boys. Sadie picked up the phone with shaking hands and dialed the emergency number. She quickly explained the situation to the dispatcher. Within minutes, the loud wail of approaching police sirens echoed through the park. 2 police cruisers pulled up to the edge of the grass. 4 police officers quickly secured the scene. They placed Kyle and his friends in handcuffs and escorted them to the back of the police vehicles. The harassment was officially over. These boys would face serious legal consequences for assault and destruction of property. They would never return to this park again. Once the police left, a heavy silence settled over the hidden corner of the park. Wayne finally took a deep breath, letting his intense anger slowly fade away. He walked over to Sadie. She was still crying softly, looking down at the ruined canvas in the mud. Wayne knelt down beside her wheelchair. He gently wiped a tear from her cheek with his thumb. "Are you hurt?" Wayne asked softly, his eyes scanning her for any injuries. "Did they touch you?" Sadie shook her head. "No," she whispered. "I am just scared, and I am so sorry about the painting. It was supposed to be a surprise for you." Wayne stood up and walked over to the fallen canvas. He carefully picked it up from the mud. He brushed away the loose dirt and examined the image. Despite the jagged tear and the muddy stains, the painting was absolutely breathtaking. It was a perfect, incredibly lifelike portrait of him and Apollo. The sheer amount of love and dedication poured into the artwork was undeniably clear. Wayne felt a massive lump form in his throat. He had never seen himself look so noble or strong. He realized just how deeply this amazing woman cared for him. He walked back to Sadie, holding the torn canvas carefully in his hands. "It is the most beautiful thing I have ever seen," Wayne said sincerely. "A small tear does not ruin a masterpiece, Sadie. It just adds a new chapter to its story, just like our scars add a new chapter to ours." Sadie looked up at him, a small, fragile smile breaking through her tears. She reached out and took his hand. Wayne held her fingers tightly. He silently promised himself that he would spend the rest of his life making sure she never had to cry from fear ever again. The urgent ringing of the secure phone shattered the quiet morning inside Wayne's quarters. He answered with a crisp, professional tone. The voice on the other end was his commanding officer. Wayne received immediate orders for a highly classified and incredibly dangerous overseas deployment. His unit was mobilizing in less than 24 hours. Wayne hung up the phone and stared blankly at the wall. His heart sank with a heavy feeling of dread. He was a dedicated Navy SEAL who lived for his duty. However, things were vastly different now. He had Sadie and Apollo to think about. Apollo sat patiently by the door with his leash in his mouth. The intelligent German shepherd sensed the sudden shift in his handler's mood. Wayne walked over and knelt beside his loyal dog. "We have to leave, buddy," Wayne whispered softly. "I have to tell her the bad news." He rubbed Apollo behind the ears with a heavy sigh. He had promised Sadie he would protect her corner of the park every single morning. Now he had to break that promise. He packed his military gear with practiced efficiency, but his mind was entirely focused on the beautiful artist in the wheelchair. He needed to see her right away to explain the situation. He grabbed his keys and drove straight to her small apartment complex. The drive felt agonizingly long. He rehearsed the conversation in his head multiple times, but no words seemed adequate. He did not want to see the disappointment or fear in her hazel eyes. Wayne knocked gently on the wooden door of Sadie's apartment. He heard the soft hum of her manual wheelchair moving across the floorboards. The door opened to reveal Sadie wearing a paint-splattered apron over her simple clothes. Her face lit up with a bright, welcoming smile when she saw him and Apollo. The German shepherd wagged his tail and immediately nudged her hand for affection. "Wayne, this is a wonderful surprise," Sadie said cheerfully. "Please come inside." Sadie invited them into her modest but incredibly cozy home. The walls were covered in vibrant landscape paintings and detailed sketches. The small living space smelled of oil paint and fresh coffee. Her smile slowly faded when she took a closer look at Wayne's tense expression. His ice-blue eyes held a deep sorrow he could not conceal. "What is wrong?" Sadie asked, her voice filled with sudden concern. Wayne took a deep breath and delivered the difficult news. "I just received urgent orders," Wayne explained quietly. "I am leaving the country tomorrow morning for an undisclosed location. The mission is classified." He apologized profusely for having to leave her so suddenly. "I will leave Apollo here with you," Wayne promised. "He will guard you and keep you safe while I am gone." Sadie listened quietly as her hands gripped the wheels of her chair tightly. A look of genuine fear and deep sadness crossed her beautiful face. She understood the harsh realities of military life, but the thought of him being in mortal danger terrified her. She tried to maintain a brave front, but her hands were trembling violently. She turned her wheelchair abruptly toward a small wooden table in the corner of the room to grab a tissue. In her nervous haste, her elbow bumped a small stack of wooden picture frames and loose art papers. The items tumbled off the edge of the table and scattered across the wooden floor with a loud clatter. Wayne immediately stepped forward to help her clean up the mess. He dropped to his knees and began gathering the scattered papers and fallen frames. "I am so sorry for being clumsy," Sadie apologized repeatedly, wiping a tear from her eye. "It is perfectly fine," Wayne assured her gently. "Just let me get these for you." He reached under the edge of the small wooden table to retrieve a stray sketch. As he lifted his head, his eyes caught sight of the top of the table. It was not just a piece of furniture, it was a carefully arranged memorial. A neatly folded American flag sat in the center. Next to the flag was a framed photograph of a young man in a military uniform. Wayne felt his blood run completely cold. He recognized the man in the photograph instantly. It was a face that haunted his nightmares for years. Resting gently in front of the photograph was a pair of silver military dog tags. Wayne reached out with a trembling hand and picked up the cold metal tags. He read the engraved name aloud in a barely audible whisper. Matthew Miller. The name echoed in his mind like a thunderclap. The air in the small apartment suddenly felt incredibly thin. Wayne could barely breathe as a flood of violent memories washed over him. He was transported back to a dusty hostile street thousands of miles away. He heard the deafening sound of enemy gunfire and felt the scorching heat of the desert sun. He saw Matthew Miller, his brave team leader, pushing him violently to the ground. Matthew had used his own body as a human shield to block a barrage of incoming bullets meant for Wayne. Matthew died in the dirt that day, so Wayne could live. It was a sacrifice that left Wayne with unbearable survivor's guilt. Wayne slowly turned his head to look at Sadie. She was watching him with a confused and concerned expression. "Did you know him?" Sadie asked, noticing his frozen state. She wondered why the strong Navy SEAL was suddenly staring at her brother's memorial with tears forming in his ice-blue eyes. Wayne looked at her facial features closely. He saw the striking resemblance, the same hazel eyes and the same determined jawline. The tragic truth hit him with the force of a physical blow. The kind and resilient woman he was falling deeply in love with was the younger sister of the very man who had sacrificed his life to save him. The universe had brought them together in the most unexpected and heartbreaking way. "He was my team leader," Wayne choked out, his voice cracking with intense emotion. "He saved my life." Wayne knelt on the floor completely speechless while holding the silver dog tags tightly in his fist. He realized that his promise to protect Sadie was no longer just a simple act of kindness. It was a sacred duty to the man who had given him a second chance at life. Wayne remained on his knees on the wooden floor of the small apartment. The cold silver dog tags felt incredibly heavy in his palm. Sadie watched him with wide hazel eyes. She saw the profound shock and deep sorrow in his ice-blue eyes. She gently touched his broad shoulder, her fingers trembling slightly. She asked him how he knew her brother. Wayne took a slow, deep breath to steady his racing heart. He needed to be completely honest with her. He stood up slowly and sat on the edge of the small sofa, keeping his gaze fixed directly on Sadie. He began to explain that Matthew was his team leader. His voice was steady, but thick with raw emotion. He told her they were deployed together 5 years ago in a hostile and unforgiving environment. Wayne described Matthew as the bravest and most dedicated soldier he had ever known. He told Sadie how much her brother loved her. Matthew talked about his little sister constantly. He always carried a small photograph of her in his tactical vest. Matthew often told the rest of the team that he wanted to come home and see Sadie display her beautiful paintings in a real art gallery. Sadie felt a large lump form in her throat. Hearing her older brother's kind words from someone else brought a fresh, overwhelming wave of grief. She asked Wayne if Matthew really said those things. Wayne confirmed it without any hesitation. He leaned forward and rested his elbows on his knees, his posture defensive and closed off. He explained the details of the classified extraction mission. Things went completely wrong very quickly. They were ambushed in a narrow, dusty street. The enemy fire was intense and relentless. They were pinned down behind a ruined brick wall with no immediate backup. Wayne admitted that he was the youngest and most inexperienced guy on the team back then. He made a terrible tactical error. He stepped out of their safe cover for just a single second to assess the perimeter. It was a stupid, fatal mistake. A hidden sniper had a clear, direct shot at him. Matthew saw the deadly threat happening in real time. He did not hesitate or think about his own safety for a single fraction of a second. Matthew lunged forward and pushed Wayne hard to the dirt ground. Matthew took the fatal bullet that was meant for Wayne. Sadie gasped loudly and covered her mouth with both of her hands. Hot tears immediately welled up in her bright hazel eyes and spilled over her cheeks. The official military report had only stated that Matthew died bravely in the line of duty during a combat operation. The military officials never gave her the specific, graphic details of his final heroic moments. Hearing the exact truth was completely overwhelming. Wayne whispered that Matthew died saving his life. A single tear rolled down his scarred cheek and dropped onto the wooden floor. He confessed that he had carried the crushing weight of survivor's guilt for 5 long years. He always felt like he did not deserve to survive that terrible day. He spent every single day since then trying his best to be a soldier worthy of Matthew's ultimate sacrifice. He looked at Sadie with absolute sincerity. He promised her that when he met her in the park, he just wanted to protect her from those cruel bullies. He had absolutely no idea she was Matthew's sister. He swore to her that he did not know the truth until he saw the memorial on her table. Sadie sat frozen in her manual wheelchair. The room felt completely silent except for the sound of her rapid, uneven breathing. Apollo sensed the heavy emotional weight in the air. The intelligent German shepherd walked over and rested his large head gently on Sadie's lap. He let out a soft, comforting whine. Sadie instinctively buried her fingers deep into his thick black and tan fur. She closed her eyes and let the tears fall freely. The pain of losing Matthew was still incredibly sharp. It felt like the tragic accident had happened just yesterday. Wayne watched her cry and felt a crushing ache in his chest. He fully expected her to hate him. He thought she would rightfully blame him for making her an orphan. He slowly stood up and took a hesitant step toward the front door. He told her quietly that he should leave. He said he understood if she never wanted to see his face again. He offered to make alternative arrangements for someone else to watch Apollo while he was deployed overseas. Sadie quickly commanded him to stop. Her voice was surprisingly strong and firm despite her flowing tears. Wayne froze in his tracks immediately. He turned around to face her. Sadie wiped her wet cheeks with the back of her hand and took a deep breath. She grabbed the metal wheels of her chair and pushed herself much closer to him. She reached out and took his large, calloused hands in hers. She looked deep into his ice-blue eyes and asked if he really thought Matthew would want her to hate him. She explained that her brother was the most selfless and protective person in the entire world. He protected her throughout her whole life. She told Wayne that if Matthew chose to save him, it meant he saw something incredibly valuable in him. Matthew believed Wayne's life was worth saving. Wayne shook his head slowly, arguing that Matthew left her all alone and that she lost her family because of his tactical mistake. Sadie corrected him firmly. She stated that she lost her family because of a terrible war, not because of him. She assured Wayne that she could never blame him for what happened. She squeezed his hands tightly and told him to look at the bigger picture. This was not a cruel coincidence. This was a profound gift. Matthew brought them together. He knew Sadie was lonely and struggling with her disability. He sent his best soldier and his loyal dog to find her in that park. He was still protecting her through Wayne. The massive burden of guilt that Wayne had carried for 5 years suddenly began to evaporate. He fell to his knees in front of her wheelchair. He buried his face in her lap and finally let himself cry. Sadie stroked his dark hair gently and hummed a soft, soothing melody. They stayed like that for a long time, sharing their profound grief and finding immense comfort in each other. Apollo sat faithfully beside them, leaning his warm, solid body against Wayne. Eventually, Wayne lifted his head. His eyes were clear, focused, and filled with a fierce new determination for the future. He told Sadie that he had to leave the next morning for a 6-month deployment. He admitted it was a dangerous mission, but he needed her to know the complete truth. He declared his love for her. He told her he had loved her since the very first day he saw her painting by the peaceful lake. Sadie smiled brightly through her remaining tears. She told him she loved him too. She said he and Apollo brought light back into her dark world and gave her a reason to feel safe again. Wayne reached into his pocket and pulled out his keys. He detached a small silver house key and placed it directly into her palm. He asked her to move into his house while he was gone. He explained that his home had ramps and wide doors, making it fully accessible for her wheelchair. He wanted to know she was completely safe and comfortable. Sadie looked at the small key. It was a tangible promise of a beautiful future together. She closed her fingers around it tightly and agreed to move in. She promised to take perfect care of Apollo. However, she stated she had one strict condition. Wayne promised to do anything she asked. Sadie leaned forward and cupped his face with both hands. Her hazel eyes burned with absolute certainty. She ordered him to come back to her. She stated clearly that she refused to lose another hero in her life. She told him to complete his mission and return home. Wayne felt a powerful surge of adrenaline and profound hope. He had a real, tangible reason to survive now. He nodded firmly and accepted her order. Sadie smiled and leaned down to kiss him. The kiss was deep, passionate, and filled with undeniable love. Wayne wrapped his strong arms around her waist, holding her as close as physically possible. When they finally pulled apart, Wayne stood up and felt stronger than ever before. He looked at Apollo and gave a specific hand signal. Apollo immediately sat at attention beside Sadie. Wayne commanded the dog to guard her. He looked at Sadie one last time, memorizing her beautiful face, and walked out the door ready to face the darkness, completely confident that he would return to the light. The morning Wayne deployed, the sky was a heavy shade of gray. Sadie sat in her wheelchair by the large front window of Wayne's house, her fingers buried deep in Apollo's thick black and tan fur. She watched the dark military vehicle pull away, carrying the man she loved into the dangerous unknown. The large house felt incredibly empty the very moment the front door closed. Wayne had made sure everything was perfectly arranged for her comfort. The wooden ramps were sturdy, the kitchen counters were lowered, and the living space was incredibly safe. But without his quiet strength and reassuring presence, the rooms felt vast and lonely. Apollo whined softly and rested his heavy chin on her knee. The intelligent German shepherd missed his handler just as much as she did. Sadie promised herself she would honor Wayne's final request. She would stay strong, keep hoping, and wait patiently for his safe return. Weeks slowly turned into months. The military provided absolutely no updates regarding Wayne's highly classified mission. The total silence was often agonizing. Sadie woke up many nights in a cold sweat, her mind plagued by terrible visions of dusty streets, loud explosions, and incoming enemy fire. During those dark, terrifying hours, Apollo was her absolute anchor. The loyal dog would jump onto the edge of her bed, lie across her fragile legs, and provide a comforting, solid weight that grounded her in reality. She realized that Apollo was not just guarding her physical safety, but he was actively protecting her fragile heart from breaking. To keep her mind from spiraling into total despair, Sadie poured all her intense emotions into her art. She set up her heavy wooden easel in the bright living room and placed the torn canvas on it. The jagged rip right through Wayne's painted uniform was a stark reminder of the cruelty they had faced in the park. But Wayne had told her that a tear did not ruin a masterpiece. It simply added a new chapter to its story. Sadie decided to make that chapter absolutely beautiful. She carefully stitched the torn canvas back together using a fine, shimmering golden thread. She painted over the damaged area with vibrant, glowing colors, turning the ugly scar into a brilliant symbol of resilience, healing, and survival. She worked tirelessly from sunrise to sunset, letting her paintbrush speak the words she could not say aloud. She painted other portraits, too, focusing entirely on the everyday courage of ordinary people. She painted a local firefighter covered in ash, a tired hospital nurse working a double shift, and a young mother protecting her children. But the large portrait of Wayne and Apollo remained her absolute focus. The local art community eventually took notice of her incredible dedication and unique talent. A kind gallery owner named Marcus visited her home one sunny afternoon. Marcus was a tall man with silver hair, wire-rimmed glasses, and a genuine appreciation for raw, emotional talent. He was deeply moved by her new collection and immediately offered to host a special exhibition at his prestigious downtown gallery. They decided to call the event Silent Heroes. Sadie agreed without hesitation, knowing it was the perfect way to honor Wayne and her late brother Matthew. The opening night of the exhibition arrived on a crisp autumn evening. The spacious gallery was brightly lit and crowded with local art enthusiasts, supportive community members, and new friends. Sadie wore an elegant dark blue dress and sat proudly near the center of the room. Apollo wore a special red service vest and sat obediently by her wheelchair, calmly observing the large, buzzing crowd. The centerpiece of the entire exhibition was her repaired masterpiece. It was displayed prominently on a raised platform, illuminated by soft, warm spotlights. The golden thread she had used to mend the tear shimmered beautifully, catching the eye of everyone who walked past. People whispered in genuine awe at the lifelike detail of the fierce Navy SEAL and the fiercely loyal German Shepherd. Eventually, Marcus tapped a crystal glass to get the crowd's attention. He introduced Sadie with glowing praise and handed her a small silver microphone. Sadie took a deep breath, looking out at the friendly faces. She spoke clearly and passionately about the profound inspiration behind her work. She explained that true heroes did not always wear capes or make the evening news. Sometimes they wore dusty military uniforms, and sometimes they had 4 legs and a wagging tail. She spoke about the profound sacrifices made by those who protect others unconditionally. She did not explicitly mention Wayne's current dangerous deployment, but the raw, trembling emotion in her voice made many people in the audience wipe away tears. As she finished her speech, the crowd erupted into warm, enthusiastic applause. Suddenly, Apollo stood up. The highly trained German Shepherd completely ignored his strict training to remain seated quietly. He let out a loud, joyful bark that echoed like a gunshot throughout the quiet gallery. The crowd parted instinctively, leaving a clear, straight path from the main glass entrance directly to Sadie. A tall, broad-shouldered figure stood in the doorway. It was Wayne. He was wearing his formal Navy uniform, adorned with shiny medals. His posture was as rigid and disciplined as ever, but he looked incredibly exhausted. He had a small white bandage on his left cheek and a visible limp in his step, but his bright ice-blue eyes were locked entirely on Sadie. A radiant, breathtaking smile spread across his tired face. Sadie dropped the microphone. It hit the hardwood floor with a loud thud, but she did not care at all. She pushed the metal wheels of her chair forward with all her remaining strength, racing across the room. Wayne met her halfway. He dropped heavily to his knees right in the middle of the crowded gallery, completely disregarding his injured leg and his formal uniform. He wrapped his strong, muscular arms tightly around her and buried his face deep in her neck. Sadie held him as tightly as physically possible, her tears of absolute joy soaking his collar. Apollo danced around them in happy, frantic circles, barking loudly and licking Wayne's face repeatedly. The crowded room burst into a deafening, celebratory cheer, but Sadie and Wayne did not hear a single sound. They were completely lost in each other, anchored in the overwhelming relief of the present moment. He had kept his sacred promise to her. He had survived the darkest terrors of the battlefield and fought his way back to the light. He was finally home, safe and sound. Their beautiful story, marked by pain, healing, and unbreakable love, was finally a completed picture. The story of Wayne, Sadie, and Apollo teaches us that the darkest tragedies can sometimes lead to the most profound connections. True heroes are not just those who sacrifice themselves on the battlefield, but also those who find the courage to heal, to love again, and to protect the fragile beauty in this world. I believe this story is a beautiful reminder that our scars do not define our future. Matthew's ultimate sacrifice was not the end of a story, but the beginning of a new one for his sister and his brave brother in arms. It shows that loyalty and true love, whether from a dedicated Navy SEAL, a resilient artist, or a faithful German Shepherd, can truly mend a broken heart. If Wayne and Sadie's journey touched your heart, please share this video with your friends and family. Leave a comment below to let us know your thoughts on their incredible bond, and do not forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories. May you always find light and hope even in your darkest days.